How are we doing? This is Senior Master Sergeant Jackson. I'm giving a block of instruction on progressive discipline. So let's start with the obvious. What is progressive discipline? Basically, progressive discipline is a Civil Air Patrol approved method of reacting or taking care of poor performance, whether that's a lack of knowledge or maybe after educating a person, they have the knowledge and they just don't want to do it, and that would be a behavioral issue. So it's either going to be fall into educating someone or correcting a behavior. All right. The other thing I'd like to mention is that this is not an optional item. This is mandatory or mandated for us to do this process. So it's in the regulation. It does specify that this is a process we need to do in order to enforce discipline and standards within our organization. Another thing I need to bring up is that I've seen people do this partially during an encampment or at squadron level. If you don't really know this very well, you could cause more problems by doing a partial version of that, okay? So this is a good opportunity for us to sort of lay out the standards so everybody knows where we're at. And I'm going to give you the big picture, and then I'm going to fortify that with the smaller pieces as the class goes on. And that's why I have that traffic light up there. I think a traffic light does a great job of showing a progression. In this case, it'll show progressive discipline. Of course, the green is the lowest level, and of course, the highest level will be red, just like on a traffic light, of course. So let's talk about that. Let's say that a cadet commits a what we call a low-level infraction or offense. Now, an offense or infraction is nothing more than breaking the rules and or doing the wrong thing. Okay, so that's what an infraction or an offense is. So our cadet could do anything like be late for formation, have an inappropriate uniform, not maintain their workspace. There's a list of low-level infractions, and I'm going to provide those to you, okay? What you're going to do in that particular case is you're going to be in the green zone, which is just a warning. Essentially, you're just going to do an on-the-spot correction. And remember three things with on-the-spot correction, okay? Make it concise, just get to the point, don't elaborate, and just make sure they understand where the standard's at, okay? Quiet, make sure it happens in private, okay? And compassionate. This cadet does not know what they're doing. There's no reason to get on them about that, okay? As soon as you educate them, then there's no excuse. But at the very least, be compassionate. Give them that older brother or older sister nudge in the right direction, all right? Now let's just say that cadet continues to become late for formation 2 or 3 times. Well, that gets elevated now to the discipline level on this chart or traffic light. Do not misconfuse discipline with punishment. Two completely different things, and this is where a lot of the problems stem from. I'll get into that later on, okay? So our cadet goes up to this level of discipline, and there's a way that we treat them in a positive way for both them and us. Secondly, there are what we call mid-level offenses, okay? That means if a cadet does one of these things, you don't treat them at the lowest level, okay? You treat them at the mid-level or at the yellow or disciplinary level. Now, what are these kinds of offenses? Well, bullying is one of them. Having alcohol during a Civil Air Patrol activity as a cadet, and having tobacco at a Civil Air Patrol activity as a cadet, and there are more, okay? So when an individual does those things, you have to start off on the second phase of this, so the discipline phase. And I would strongly recommend you get it in writing. We have an expression in the military, if it wasn't written down, it didn't happen, okay? So that person obviously would be at this stage. And let's say that that bully, you've corrected their action, you've had them do some corrective training, and they still continue to bully. Well, they're going to be bumped up now to the penthouse, the red light, which is the report zone. Likewise, there are cadets that will commit offenses that they go right to red, all right? Um, these are the type of things that would terminate membership, reduce in rank, put a pause in their Civil Air Patrol participation, okay? Okay, progressive discipline. I'm your instructor, Senior Master Sergeant Jackson, the South Carolina Command NCO. References. There's a really good, if you go to the national webpage, is a very good, extensive webpage that talks about this at length. It's really good. I went through that thing and I used it a lot to actually develop this class. The other thing you need to look at is CAP Regulation 60-1, and in that regulation, I think it's Section 3-5, there's 321 words that sum this whole process up. It's very black and white and straightforward. My class gives you a little bit more details to help you do this properly. But like I said, it's not that long. I mean, it's not all that involved of a program for you to actually research on your own. And CAP Regulation 60-2, this basically identifies all the infractions that CAP considers to be infractions and how they should be handled. Very important document or regulation to have in your charge. Likewise, I ended up getting this book, a very extensive book on progressive discipline. Yes, progressive discipline is not unique to Civil Air Patrol. It's in a lot of areas and corporations, and on a light level, it's in the military services as well. As far as that reference book, very extensive. I would use it for a reference book. You'll spend a long time getting through that thing. Class length, I have 15 slides. I look to get through this as quickly and as fast as possible. Okay, believe it or not, you probably already know what progressive discipline is, and I bet your parents possibly do that at home. Let me explain that a little bit, okay? Let's say it's Saturday and, I don't know, you're told to clean up your room by lunchtime, noon, okay? And you didn't do it, all right? Well, you're going to get in trouble, of course, right? Sunday rolls around, you get in a fight with your brother or sister or sibling, you get the upper hand in the fight, and you bruise them or give them a bump, and all of a sudden your parents are really upset at you for doing that, the fight. And then Monday rolls around in school, you thought the weekend was bad, they caught you cheating on a test. Now look at these three things: not cleaning your room up by noon, physically harming your brother or sister, right, and cheating on a test. Those are three levels of different infractions, and I'm assuming the punishment in your household will look very different. For example, I doubt seriously if you get caught cheating on a test in school that your parents are going to institute the same punishment for not cleaning your room, okay? But let me get into the differences between discipline and punishment at this juncture. Okay, so what is punishment, all right? All punishment is negative reinforcement for negative behavior, right? Let me give you some examples. We know this one, okay? You steal a cookie from the cookie jar, you get delivered a punishment, physical pain in this particular scenario, all right? Likewise, if you do something wrong in public school, if you do go to public school, you could actually get detention, and that could be for any infraction, late to class, tardiness, skipping school, talking back to a teacher, cheating on a test. Again, negative reinforcement for negative behavior. Okay, basic training in any of the branches of service. If you do a left face instead of a right face when the drill sergeant called left face, you're going to probably do push-ups, all right? Again, negative reinforcement. We are introducing discomfort into your life because you did the wrong thing. And finally, my last example is a speeding ticket, all right? If you go through, I don't know, get pulled over for a speeding. Now, let's look at our chart there again. Let's say that the police officer says, you know what, I'm going to give you a warning this one time. And let's say that week you run into the police officer again, speeding. Chances are he's not going to let you walk away with a warning. So just like progressive discipline, right? You started off with a warning, and of course you didn't adhere to the warning. Now you're actually going to pay some money for it. But paying that money is a discomfort to your wallet, all right? So what's the difference, though? What is discipline? Discipline, to say it best, is corrective training. Now, you've heard the quote, have the punishment fit the crime. In this particular scenario, I would say have the offense match the corrective training. Let me go back to that earlier example to give you a better idea what I'm talking about. Okay, so we all remember this picture from before. Okay, let's start off with the Saturday that you didn't get your room cleaned up by noon. We could honestly call that a low-level offense, all right? So in your household, I'm sure that in many cases you may get a punishment versus corrective training. A punishment might be a spanking. They may not get your allowance that week, which is denial, right? Negative reinforcement for poor performances. All right, but let's take a look at this and make it corrective training. Corrective training is a method of showing people that they had done wrong and having them become part of that solution, all right? For example, this has happened in my household with the kids growing up. If they didn't get their rooms clean by noon, guess what? They stayed there until it was the standards, all right? Now, I did not load on extra stuff because they didn't meet the requirement. For example, I didn't say, well, because you didn't clean your room, you're going to clean the entire house by Monday. When you go excessive on corrective training, it becomes punishment, all right? Just have them do it to standards, all right? And then they're denying themselves their own private time by having to work late to get it right. Now, the fight, we're going to call that a mid-level offense, right? What could happen there? Well, your parents could spank you, right? Meet violence with violence. I'm not sure if that's the right answer. Maybe you could be grounded. There's a lot of things in the household, but how would we handle this in a corrective discipline way? Well, let's go back to the grounding, all right? If I made you or grounded you from Monday to Wednesday and just have you sit in the house, that's really not doing anything but punishing you, right? What if I told you that when you get done with school Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday, I want you to get done with your homework, and then I want you to start on an essay about how what you did was wrong to your brother or sister, okay? And I want you to work on that on Monday, Tuesday, and complete it by Wednesday. And I'm going to check up on your work progressively over dinner, all right? So yeah, you're kind of putting them in a position where they're seeing they're wrong, all right? And we can definitely call this a high-level offense. Yes, granted, I'm sure there's a lot of punishments that can come your way because of this. However, this is a concern. This is a behavioral problem. I mean, this could be you starting on the wrong path and is going to be a concern to your family because they love and care for you. You might end up going to have to talk to a counselor, or maybe if you have a good youth minister in your church, talk to them. But this is serious stuff, and I'm sure you're going to get punishment on top of it, like being grounded in school. But we have to look at the way that this person can feel bad or should feel bad for what they did. Another thing, on top of getting outside help, I would have them write an apology letter to the teacher. Definitely would. So again, we're trying to have people see the wrong in their way, and we're trying to motivate them to redirect themselves. Okay, so how are we going to do this discipline or corrective training in Civil Air Patrol, right? Well, let's start from the left to right. These are examples. I'm pretty strong about always starting off with a counseling. Just sometimes that's all you have to do. A one-on-one sit down, write it on paper, come up with what we call a get well plan. And when it's in writing, sometimes people take it that much more serious. However, that's what we call a light ping. Let's say they deserve to probably do something a little bit more deeper as far as corrective training. I have created these sheets of paper. For every offense, I have a sheet of paper that talks about where this is a violation within Civil Air Patrol. It talks at the cadet level, by the way. It references the Learn to Lead volumes and also identifies with the core values where that particular offense is in violation. And at the end of the paper, gives 5 recommendations on how to change their behavior. All right? So you may just hand them this one sheet that I'll be have with me at the encampment. I'll make available to everyone, and it's only 500 words. It's not that much of a sheet, so all they have to do is find time, read through it, come back to you, and you should quiz them and talk about the content just to make sure they understood it. All right? If you don't do that, you're failing. Okay? You need to understand what's on that piece of paper and actually use an opportunity to follow up to make sure they understand what was right or wrong. Let's just say that you feel that that's not good enough, that they need to have a little bit more of a nudge, right? Well, that's the piece of paper that I was talking about, and I do have a copy for every offense that they could actually do, generally speaking. They could do an essay, all right? And don't load it on heavy or high. I mean, anywhere from 200 to 400 words should be adequate. That'll be enough to fill a page. Another thing I want you to be aware of as well, if you're going to do these additional things, corrective training, make sure there's time for them to do this. Like you will tell them, hey, after dinner tonight, we have an hour of time which we're doing uniform maintenance. This is going to be your opportunity to actually read the sheet of paper and for me to talk to you, okay? You don't want to create a situation where you give them this corrective training and it takes them away from actual cadet training, all right? You do not want to give them that excuse at all. And finally, another method you could use is take that sheet, have them study it, and give a class to the flight as far as hip pocket training, a reference to that. Now, they don't have to admit that they were late for formation or that they had a uniform infraction, whatever the case might be, but especially cadets that are more senior in grade, that are more confident to get up in front and to talk, this might be an opportunity where they could get up in front and say, hey, listen, we have a problem in our flight with showing up on time, so I talked to the flight commander and he and I agreed that I should give this class, right? Make it look like he's doing it for the benefit of the flight, okay? And these are methods, all right? What you're trying to do is show them the wrong of their way. Put it in their corner. Okay, now let's just talk about the levels of misconduct so we have a general idea. Remember, I'm going to give you a cheat sheet for this too, by the way, but the regulations spell it out as well, okay? All right, disrespect, okay? Disrespect doesn't have to be as aggressive as these two silhouettes. Disrespect, we're talking about low-level misconduct, so this would be along the lines of maybe a cadet not saluting, maybe instead of saying sir or ma'am or sergeant, they say yeah, you know. Basically low-level stuff, maybe some bad habits they picked up at the squadron they brought to whatever the activity is at. So you're giving them that gentle nudge to get them in the right direction, educating them. Tardy, okay? It also specifies not just tardy, but tardy without a reason. Of course, when they show up late, you're going to ask them, why are you late? And they're going to either have a real reason or not have a real reason, all right? But yeah, that's a big one right there, is being at the right place at the right time. Affection, that's public signs of affection. We're not supposed to be hugging, holding hands, or anything else like that in uniform, right? Insubordination, okay? All insubordination is if I tell you to do something or not do something, you intentionally do the opposite of that, okay? That's insubordination. Disrupting, okay? That's disrupting a class or training, and this is a big one. I notice cadets like to do this a lot. Again, if you don't address this right at the beginning, it's just going to perpetuate or continue on, right? Okay, let's go on to number 6, which is failure to follow the chain of command, all right? They have a structured command with flight sergeants and commanders, whatever else have you. This is them going over their head and talking to people, breaking the chain of command. I would like to add to this, so we all know there are certain things such as safety and cadet protection that cadets are allowed to actually go to the commander under an open door policy or safety or whomever else. I'm not denying them that opportunity. This, however, would be in a situation where it's not an emergency and they just decided on their own to bypass the chain of command. Property. When a cadet is given property, they need to be explained. You're required to protect and safeguard the property and maintain it correctly, all right? That's implied, but you need to reinforce that. So if it ends up broken or stolen, you're going to have to find out, was it because of neglect or did that cadet not really was in a position to control it or not, okay? Okay, non-informing parents, all right? A lot of times in activities or things we do, we have to say, okay, make sure your parents know. Now, often that's in writing, so we don't run into too many problems, but let's say they forged a signature or they told you they told a parent when they didn't, okay? That's a misconduct. Malingering, okay? Basically malingering, and we all know the scenario, right? If you don't want to go to school because of a math test, you pretend like you're sick and you get out of going to school, all right? Not to say anybody here does that, but that's malingering. This is very, very hard to prove in a Civil Air Patrol activity environment. I'll tell you why. Let's say that somebody has an injury, they go to medical, and medical, I mean, they may not be a bruise or a broken bone, but their leg might hurt, or they may have a stomach ache, or they may have a headache. You're going to have to trust that, all right? And I don't care how you feel, you're going to have to support and trust it, especially if the health services officer has become a part of the solution, which he or she should be. Now, I will say one thing though. It was an event that happened to us where a cadet had a supposed injury, and he may have had it or not. I don't know. He went to a lake day, and basically, the surprise, I was able to play kickball without any injury. All right. Okay. The best way that could have been handled is not to allow them to do that. Remember, you're banking, or you're not banking, but you're trusting that they're injured. So when you do an activity like that, you need to designate, hey, listen, you can't do what the rest of the cadets are doing because you're injured, but sit at the picnic table and here's I don't know, a checkerboard or a deck of cards to play solitaire or play fish with your wingman. But that would be the better way to handle that without having to call the cadet out on malingering, because that is way too hard to prove. Uniform infractions, okay? I don't think cadets always try to wear the wrong stuff. Some might, okay? But bring it to their attention and they should correct it. Okay, now we're on to mid-level, all right? We know that mid-level misconducts are treated a lot more seriously than low-level misconducts. And let's go over those real quick. Okay, if you repeat a low-level misconduct, then that bumps you up to mid-level misconduct, all right? Basically, at the low level, you did an on-the-spot correction, you educated them, and they've decided on their own that they're not going to do the right thing. Okay, now we have a behavioral problem. This is where we deal with them as far as mid-level misconduct. Another mid-level misconduct is not just false statements, all right? It's basically not giving important information to their leadership, okay, or withholding important information. Bullying. This is a serious offense. Actually, to get into the weeds about bullying, it's not just physically harming somebody, it's mentally harming someone as well, insulting them. Likewise, spreading rumors is actually considered part of bullying, believe it or not, all right? So this is a concern too, and this is a failure sometimes. Why? Well, sometimes people will see a person bullying somebody else, a cadet, and they treat it like a low-level misconduct. They give them a verbal warning, and they basically make an on-the-spot correction. Well, the bully has a behavioral problem. It's not that he so much doesn't know not to pick on people, he's just choosing to do that. Now, say for example, you tell a bully, hey, Cadet Jones, I want you to stop picking on Cadet Smith, and then you walk away, right? All you've really done at that point is put a target on Cadet Smith, all right? You need to get this in writing immediately, and you don't have to, but I'm strongly recommending anything that starts at the mid-level misconduct or when it gets to mid-level, it needs to be in writing. That's my strong recommendation to you. Okay, possessing substances during a cadet activity, and that's alcohol and that's tobacco, and I'm going to throw in there drugs as well, even though that's not mentioned, but it's implied, all right? Okay, this is the absolute worst level of misconduct. This is a high level of misconduct. This is at a juncture where we're not so much going to be doing disciplinary training, probably going to have to do some administrative actions, whether that's letting them go from Civil Air Patrol, having them return home early from the activity, reduction in rank, possibly even a pause in their Civil Air Patrol career. Let's cover those then. The first one is a repeated mid-level misconduct. So that bully that you did the right thing, you got it in writing, you gave him some corrective training so he could see the folly of his way. Well, 2 days later, he's out there picking on cadets again. He gets bumped up, okay? You don't keep him at the mid-level at that point. He's showed you that he's ready to go up to the high level at that juncture. Fighting. Fighting is a high-level misconduct. Cheating. High-level misconduct. Sexting. High-level misconduct. Hazing, and these are Citadel cadets. What's on their head says knob, a form of hazing, obviously. Theft, okay, that's also an issue as well. And anything that is basically in violation of civil law is a high-level misconduct. Anything, right? Anything that's a legal infraction. The important thing is, I'm going to recommend this, is that when things get to the mid-level, you need to involve a senior member. Not that they're going to take charge, or you just need the oversight of a senior member. They need to be aware that the situation might make it to the high level of misconduct. Likewise, if a cadet's performance or what they do brings them in the high level of misconduct, immediately you have to inform a senior member because it's going to require that, and they're going to want to see what you did prior to that point. Okay? Counseling is critical. It's critical, all right? Basically, this is a very strong component of the progressive discipline concept. And let's get into the detail. I'll hit some high points for you here real quick. Privacy. You make sure that when you meet with the cadet, that it's in private. Obviously, if you're a senior member, you're going to have another senior member present because of Rule of Three. Um, it's not just to also protect the cadet from being embarrassed in front of his or her peers. You want an environment where you can both talk without distractions, all right? It's going to be a very serious conversation, and you both need to be heard. Atmosphere. Now, let's look at these two pictures here. The top left picture, that sergeant is counseling her subordinate. You can see that it's not that serious. They're talking it through, right? They're probably developing a get well plan or whatever the case might be. And I'm guessing that's probably a low level misconduct. Now, the lower picture, we see the airman at attention before his supervisor behind the desk, okay? I'm guessing that's a higher level of misconduct. Maybe it's a repeat offense. Maybe the first time that airman standing up had an opportunity to sit across from his supervisor, they came up with a solution, and he committed the same infraction again, all right? Now you have to ratchet up the environment. I don't think it's good to make them stand at attention the whole time. Basically, just have them stand, you sit, and you're setting a tone. Give them an opportunity to speak, but they need to feel like, okay, things are getting a bit more serious now. This might help to prevent them from getting worse. Okay, a counseling statement is not a weapon, okay? It's a mutual contract. And I say that for a reason. A lot of people like to weaponize a counseling statement. I'm going to write you up. I'm going to put paper on you. Okay, you've just basically decredited the counseling statement. You've detoothed it, all right? No, it's a mutual contract. So essentially, you're going to establish a plan, and that cadet's going to agree to actually perform the plan. Likewise, you're not going to be able to give him excessive discipline because, again, he's there, everything's in writing, all right? It keeps everybody honest. It keeps things transparent. Now, the most important part of the counseling form is the get well plan. That's your plan that you're telling the cadet that he or she will have to do in order to actually correct their performance. Do not have the cadet select their own get well plan because they're going to come up with stuff like, okay, I was late for formation. I guess I should eat a quart of ice cream. I don't know. You're in charge. You're basically directing them, how to actually correct their behavior so things improve. Follow up, follow up, follow up. This is a big one. People fail on this one a lot. Just because you did the counseling and they did the corrective training or the discipline, you need to kind of check back. I'm not saying repunish them. I'm just saying to make sure that the progress was actually successful and it stuck. Okay? Celebrate. You got to celebrate their success. If they succeed and they turn their act around, you got to make sure they appreciate that. You got to feed that. Okay, let's talk about the counseling form right now. There are 4 forms of counseling in the military and in the Civil Air Patrol, right? They're personal, career, performance, and disciplinary counseling. CAP has a lot of forms on personal, career, and performance counseling, i.e. Leadership feedback and, of course, encampment feedback and stuff like that. There isn't anything for disciplinary counseling, although it's referred to quite a bit, and they do list the components of a disciplinary counseling form. So what I did was I went to all branches of the military and I made a hybrid form that also fits Civil Air Patrol's parameters as well. So here's the form. And if you notice at the top, I put a warning statement. Just like the counseling session should be private, this form should be private as well. So you need to protect it once it's completed and signed or whatever, right? We don't want other cadets seeing this. This is personal. Now, simple enough. The top of the form is going to be the personal information to the cadet that you're counseling. And then, of course, you're going to identify what the infraction was, single word, right? Number of offenses. How many times did they actually commit this offense? Or maybe it was one time. And then, of course, what level of misconduct is it? Low, medium, or high? Circle whichever one. This does not have to be typed. In fact, a lot of times we like to type stuff and we don't have the resources or time. This can just be written hand jammed with a pen, okay? But basically, how do I know if I'm in the field and I don't have access to a computer or resources what level of misconduct it is? That's fine. I have you covered. It's on the back of the form. And then, of course, you're going to describe the situation. Don't make it overly detailed. Just address the facts and the specifics. Now, on the bottom of this block, you notice that if you want, you can actually do an additional page and you would identify it here on the bottom of that block. Again, keep it simple and straightforward. Don't go into an elaborate narrative. This is the get well plan. This is the most important part. This is the part that you're going to go with your counselee and then decide this is how we're going to get better. Now, sometimes the counseling form by itself is enough, right? It being in writing does wake people up. Maybe you might decide there doesn't need to be a plan, or maybe the plan could be something like, if this repeats, then obviously we're going to have to take more drastic actions. You have an obligation to sign the bottom of the form as well, okay? Okay, this is the back of the form. As you notice, the top portion is your follow-up. Again, I told you, follow-up's important. The front of the form will set everything in motion, okay? The back of the form is when you are checking back and making sure everything that you talked about as far as a disciplinary action or corrective training has happened and what effect it has had. And that's that portion, of course, and of course there's a place for the counselor and the counselee to sign. Again, this is a contract to keep everything transparent, to show our progress. Now remember I told you before, I mean, if you're confused, you can't memorize what level of an offense it is, it's right here. I actually have a condensed version which I took right out of the regulations, so right there alone, that should give you the space and understanding enough to actually put the important information on the front of the form and to understand at what level they're at when they cause an infraction. Okay, we talked about a lot of stuff today, so let's round it up. This is a quick summary. I'll read it aloud for you. Civil Air Patrol's progressive discipline aims to be positive and incremental, focusing on teaching self-control through guidance and mentorship. Minor infractions are addressed with informal methods like reminders and coaching, while escalating issues trigger increasingly formal interventions like counseling and potential member restrictions. And of course, we can see the progression going from green, yellow to red in that statement. Now let's sum it up with this one. The ultimate goal is to achieve accountability and behavioral change, fostering a culture of respect and responsibility within the organization. Okay, so we covered it all right? All the way from the lightest of infractions to what can get you thrown out of Civil Air Patrol and all in between. The important thing is that you're here as a mentor. I guess you need to see your role in that perspective. There's two quotes that guide me in doing this process. And the first one is, nobody deserves a tyrant. Everybody deserves a coach or a mentor, all right? And the second one is, the relationship of a leader to a subordinate is not that of a master to a slave, but that of a teacher to a student, okay? Punishment will only get you obedience. Dogs are obedient. You want loyalty. Loyalty is earned through proper discipline and corrective training. And once you recover them, the loyalty will come. And with the loyalty will come self-discipline. And self-discipline is the best discipline our cadets can actually possess.